MHO Talk Show. Giving the people what they want.
Of course.
And right about now, we have a frequent guest. She's like family, you know. None other than Dr. Andrea Douglas. Yeah. Dr. Douglas, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, welcome.
It's such a pretty day.
It is.
Glad to be here.
You know, and whenever you come on, you're just a plethora and a wealth of knowledge, right? It's like, so we could talk about anything with you. Really? That's what I love about you. That's what you are back full force again with the Swords and the Plowshares. Not that it ever stopped, but right now there's a particular initiative, right, as it pertains to the surveying and really getting our people, our Black community involved and their voice at the table, just like we were amplified, right, when it came to removing statues and it came to the presence of our representation versus, you know, like white supremacies and the symbol thereof, and even neo-Nazis, you know, like physically being here, we were very, very, very loud then. But then when it comes to, okay, what about after that, right? We obtained and melted the statues, and now we have a time to repaint the picture, right? To repaint the parks. And you're driving force behind that, you know, amongst other folks. But we aren't as loud right now, Dr. Douglas. We don't seem to care as much. We don't seem to care as much.
The work never is.
So kind of bring us up to speed a little bit, you know. I mean, I guess there could be somebody that doesn't even know what we're talking about.
Right.
So maybe give us the Swords and the Plowshares sort of, you know, stump speech.
Sure. Yeah. The stump speech. Because there's so many words. Yeah. Swords and the Plowshares is a project that the Heritage Center is stewarding. It resulted from a desire to melt down the Robert E. Lee statue. So the city gave us, through a deed of gift, that statue in December of 2020.
Congrats.
Thank you to all of us, actually. And what we have done over the course of the last it's 5 years. 5 years since the statues came down. 2019, the activist community, the community went to General Assembly and caused them to change the law that would allow those objects to be removed from our public spaces. We then went through a process, and the statue was then deeded. Very quickly thereafter, we melted it. We were then sued along with the city, and that case took about 2 years. And in October of 2023, we finally began that process of melting it down. And so over the course of the last few years, what we've been doing is some research, and we've been asking a major question: where does that object go? Some people believe that it should go right back into Market Street Park. And I don't have any issues with that. I just wanted to question that decision. And so what we've been doing is the social history of some of the parks in our community. And what we've learned is that in the urban ring of Charlottesville, there are 19 public parks. Of those 19 public parks, there are several of them that are that come out of plantation spaces, that they are directly derived from plantation spaces. There are some of them that are created in relationship to white residency.
Okay.
And by 1926, which is an important sort of set of dates for us, Paul Goodloe McIntyre had purchased enough property and then defined them as racial spaces. So ultimately, by 1926, you have 147 acres of outdoor space devoted to white play and 12 acres devoted to Black play. And that's Washington Park. Black people don't get, and again, this is a question of what can white people have and what Black people can have. So to be able to say Black people don't get a second park until 1946 is a significant statement, because it also speaks to this notion of who has the right to be outside, what does play look like, and ultimately, what does a value that actually Charlottesville claims for itself, which is the value of outside. Much of what we talk about is the Blue Ridge. We talk a lot about going out hiking and trails and things like that. the outside is an important part of our quality of life. And so Swords wants to look at that question as well as it starts to think about where could an object go. So we have ultimately identified 5 potential parks. Washington Park, Forest Hill Park, Court Square Park now, Market Street Park, and then Belmont Park. And each one of those parks carries with it a much longer history than the histories that we were considering in 2017, 2018. It allows us in these landscapes to begin to think about these places of commerce, because we talk a lot about the landscape of enslavement. Well, Virginia, this part of Virginia was the 4th richest location as a consequence of chattel slavery. And so in our midst, in our urban ring, are those kinds of spaces, which were some of them upwards of 500 acres big. So they're not small spaces. They're significant enough. And then some of those spaces then become, because of 1926, when this park space opens and the Public Assemblage Act, these spaces then become unavailable to Black people. So out of all of that comes cultural conversations. What does it mean when a community only has one place to gather in public? Right. What does the nature of that gathering look like? What does it mean when you have an opportunity as a consequence of an awareness project, because that's where we are right now, to make a statement, not for today, but for the future. Right. And all of those reasons in my mind are reasons to be at least curious, and certainly out of that curiosity, be a participant in a possibility. And so I guess that is my sort of overview, but it's also my call to action at the same time.
And that's why when you were talking to me, first thing that came to my mind was, well, then that Washington Park, right? Because to me, Washington Park already has the aura of being sort of historically Black. And it's like we already lay claim to it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if it's not Market Street Park, then I feel like it should be somewhere else to where we need to place our stamp.
Right.
You know?
Well, it's an interesting thing, even when you're starting to think about that, because part of this project also wants to have some impact on the new park plan. And in that new park plan, Washington Park is one of the places where there is some sort of intentional discourse meant to be occurring in that park. And as one looks at the history of that park, it makes sense because the 5 parks we picked in one way or another has something to do with this longer history of Black people here in Charlottesville. So whether it's Washington Park or even Forest Hills Park, there's something to be said in any of them. What we've been able to do is get 3 design teams to respond to this project, and they are leading design teams. Hood Design already has, I think I already said this before, but they already have a memorial here. It's the Catherine Foster Memorial. And most people don't know anything about it, but it's at the University of Virginia. It's in the South Hall, at the South Hall, and it memorializes the life of Catherine Foster, who was a free Black woman who bought her property in the 1830s. And because she was free Black, she was able to give that property to the women in her family until somewhere in the 1920s. And so that's Hood. They've done that. Mass has done things like the Equal Justice Initiative's Peace and Justice Park, which is the one with all of the 300-pound structures that is in Montgomery, Alabama. So that group has done that. There's also done what people would know would be the Embrace that's in Boston Commons. Right. And then Push is a much smaller organization, but still has the same amount of expertise in this area. So no matter whom gets chosen for this, we have the opportunity to speak with 3 organizations that are deeply embedded in designing the cultural landscapes of this country. Right.
What does the selection process look like for that? And then I also wonder, with regard to picking the park that this new piece will be placed in? Are you required to do a certain level of community engagement? What are the residents right around those areas saying?
Well, we have just recently contacted the neighborhood associations for those areas. And when I say we're in a community awareness, that's vastly different from the community engagement. And the community engagement is planned for the design team that's chosen. So the process ultimately right now is what we're in. And I want to say, first of all, we've already had 300 people respond to the exhibition. And when you get into the exhibition, you're offered the 3 designs. And at the end, we're asking people to help us, to advise us on their choices. Which one do they like and why? Right? So ultimately, this all comes from this idea that, Charlottesville can choose for itself, that we don't need outsiders to come in, that we can, in fact, understand our space and then be able to understand the possibilities that these things offer. Of the 3 designs, all of them in one way or another do engage with Market Street, but they also engage with other sites. And that's also what's interesting. For instance, Hood wants to put a single object in Market Street, but after a period of time, disperse that into communities. And they're planning a 24 conversation engagement. And what is going to result from it is a relationship that is both metaphoric and then very specific. So they've done some surveying of all of our trees. They've defined those trees as witness trees because they've been in the community for a while. One of the earliest ones is 1725, which is and that one is at Highland. Charlottesville, actually, its implantation systems begin in 1730. So this tree predates that. Some of the oldest trees or the younger trees are in the 1950s. And so they have been in the community, and in one way or another, they are witness to all of this social and cultural change.
I like that.
Right? It's interesting. Each one of the projects will be using this bronze. So they intend through their community engagements to capture stories and use the bronze to incise it into those silver rings. And then after a period of time, those rings will disperse into the communities where the conversations will have. And they then began the gathering place. So a community could go sit underneath that witness tree and have conversation. Could play under the tree. And so each one of them has a similar relationship to community in that way.
So when you say disperse into the communities, though, are you talking about something that's mobile, or they'll be adding new?
No, actually,
new fixtures.
You build it in Market Street, and let's say it's a year. Then you dismantle it. So one lives in Market Street, and the others live in other parts of the city. And so there is a call and response between that central object in Market Street and then in other parts. So one could maybe imagine that once a year, conversations that have been held in other parts of the community then start to be held at Market Street, right? And back and forth. Or that you visit one and your interest is, where are the other ones? So you then start to visit the other and you engage with whatever is incised in there. And ultimately, through that engagement, you begin to get some sense of what Charlottesville actually wants for itself. So that's one. And I think that's really interesting.
Yeah. Now, can I ask you about, because this came to mind. So you'll have some folks, and this is with the engagement, right? Because I know one of the big points that we need to drive home is, how do we get our people engaged in this process, right? So one thing that you'll hear is that folks will say, okay, but moving forward, how is this making my life better, right? And some folks will say, like, I've even heard it mentioned about like the memorial to enslaved laborers, the UVA. What's the difference with a project like this and someone looking at UVA's memorial? And while a lot of people love it, some people will say UVA could have taken that money and then, like like invested in our communities instead of putting this symbolic fixture here, right? I've heard that. So how do you reply to that when people say, I don't really care about the symbolism. I need like institutional change. You know?
I think though that is institutional change. Okay. Though I think that what seems to be missing in this conversation is the importance of symbols. Mm-hmm. But beyond the importance of symbols, it's the importance of conversations. Mm-hmm. And when UVA put in that memorial to enslaved laborers, it wasn't just the University of Virginia made a decision to do this thing solely on their own. Mm-hmm. And I can tell you, because I was there, many of those conversations happened in the Heritage Center. Part of the reason why that object looks the way it does is because a Black man stood up and said, wait a minute, mm-hmm. this is about slavery and we don't see any bodies. Mm-hmm. And so they changed it, mm-hmm. right? The idea that you can have all of us now understand that there were 4,000 potential Black people who built that university. Mm-hmm. That's an amplification of information that nobody knew. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right? The research was done. The work was done. We now know mm-hmm. the depth and breadth of the ways in which Black people were integral to that institution. Mm-hmm. Before, you would have just said, yeah, we know we built it. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But what about the specificity of that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now we understand that specificity. We know names. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. We also know that those names still live in our communities.
That part.
Right? Yeah. We also know that there are more people who we still have who go unnamed. Mm-hmm. And so there's work to be done to find those people. Mm-hmm. So you can see it as a sort of finite moment in time. Yeah. But it's not just always about the money. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's about the development of an awareness of place mm-hmm. that becomes a shared awareness mm-hmm. that gives you then another place of conversation to have. Mm-hmm. And for every single one of the designs that we are offering, that's an entire process. Mm-hmm. I made a commitment to the design teams to bring the most educated group of people I could to this process. Mm-hmm. But we also have a commitment, and this goes back to Black people, mm-hmm. to lift up the voices of those people who, at the time those objects were put in, had no voice. Right. Right? Right. In my mind, it is a way of having people talk about what it means to be voiceless. Mm-hmm.
Right? No, I agree 100% mm-hmm. with you, Dr. Douglas. And you actually used some buzzwords just now in your description or your response to Charles, such as finite, that I was thinking about. And Charles, I think those folks need to learn to look at this situation from a much broader perspective. Mm-hmm. Because sure, that money could be placed in something like more affordable housing and things like that. And those things have its place and its need, but it is also finite. Mm-hmm. And there are other resources that can be dedicated to it. However, information and understanding and ideology, which is what helped to get us to the place that we are now, is infinite. Mm-hmm. And so I think it must have its proper place in terms of us prioritizing those things, fixtures in our community, so that we then change the understanding, awareness, and knowledge of not just the folks that live here, but those that visit here to tell a different story. Mm-hmm. You're going to have much more, and this is a very rudimentary point, but a much bigger conversation about a piece of art that depicts something that you can have a conversation around versus an apartment building that is affordable housing for some folks.
Mm-hmm. So you did a wonderful job of actually highlighting mm-hmm. the gap that we need to bridge. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask, what is the methodology that's been considered, whether it's by the Heritage Center or by Swords and the Plowshares and the co-op thereof, of how do we bridge the gap within our own community? Because we're not even talking about sort of powers that be or other cultures trying to get them to understand. We're talking about within our own culture, right? Mm-hmm. Within our own community, to where fact of the matter is some folks would be like, that Dr. Douglas is too smart for me. She talks over my head. You know what I mean? Or be like, I don't feel comfortable there. You know what I mean? Because I feel like, you know,
whose fault is that?
like, I don't, you know, like all that kind of thing. Right. So then so how are we going to bridge this gap so that because I think the bottom line, and I love what you did with the website. I think the bottom line is, out of the responses that you've counted in regards to people chiming in when it comes to like viewing the design, the map and all that stuff, there's a disconnect. Like whether we can sit here and talk till we blue in the face. There's a disconnect we got to fix.
Right. But that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Right. You utilize the tools that work well. And again, you know, there's a difference between a moment in time where you're really taking this time to be deliberate and preparatory, which is vastly different from that moment in time, which most people fear when they're like, they expect me to know something that I can respond to.
Yeah.
And I think as we go through this process, you know, we have developed tours. Yes, there are like 3 Black people on the tour whenever we do them, but we have them. You have opportunity. We have hired Dr. Selena Cozart to help us with this conversation as well. We are hoping that, you know, we'll do a little event with BPN. It's now on May 21st. That's so far the date that we've picked, where people will come in and engage with this material with us. But we'll be doing this all through the summer. This is a little by little by little by little. I tell it to 2 of you, and hopefully you'll walk out of here and tell it to 2 more people. When we start to look at the numbers, we have a fairly good spread in age groups. But part of the reason why we have that good spread is because we have been giving tours to the 5th grade. For Charlottesville's 5th grade, right? Okay. And that's an important group for us because they are the ones who are going to inherit. But the people I'd love to be able to talk to are the people who are 18 to 24. And those are the ones that we don't always get to talk to. And so thinking about how best to engage them is something that is really important. Because if you are 18 today, 2016, you were 8. 2017, you were 8. If you are 24 today, you were 14. So most of this anyway is history for that group of people, right? They don't see it in the ways that some of us see it because we were there or we lived it. But ultimately, it is those people who are going to have to live with this object. So why not take the opportunity to design something? Why not take the opportunity to be engaged with a community that you live in that has made certain promises to you, that the only way I believe those promises are going to be fulfilled is if you are actively asking for that fulfillment. Right. And so those are the kinds of, hopefully, the messages that people hear as they start to hear more and more about this project, because the real work isn't going to happen until later in the fall, right? Our intent is to pick or have Charlottesville, not us, pick a design team by July 10th. And July 10th, because that's the 5th anniversary. 5 years have gone by since we've taken those statues down, right? Imagine what we've gone through in 5 years. Wouldn't it be interesting if you could bring that information to a conversation so that you begin to say, I understand the vast histories that we have lived with. These histories are deeply embedded in the systemic issues that we live with every day. And that's the whole point of this. This is not about solving a housing project. This is about thinking through a systemic problem that as a result of conversation and understanding, we are maybe better able to address those housing issues today.
Now, this also makes me think about voting as well. But first, let's preface it to make sure that that I have the right frame of thought, which is when it comes to parks, right? Public parks, like how far up the ladder does sort of like ownership go? So in other words, does Charlottesville like controls the rules for its park and that's it? Or then is there like a state element like to what can be done in public parks?
Well, when the ordinance was changed, that allowed the locality to make decisions about what it could be done in the parks. That's what allowed the objects to be removed. But it's also allowing the objects to be put in as well into those parks. And so really it is the city of Charlottesville's government that makes these decisions about what we can and cannot do. But we, in Swords and Plowshares, when we submitted the application, said that our greatest desire was then to gift back an object to the city. And so, the city has a right to choose what it wants in its parks. We're just hoping that what we keep in close relationship with the city, Parks and Rec, those people who make those kinds of decisions, and that this is a reciprocal relationship, that we can demonstrate that we have done the work to engage as many people as we can, including those people where, as you said, Max, where those parks, all of those neighborhood associations should equally be as informed about what we're doing as people who are wandering in through our exhibition and such. So there's a lot of work to do, and that's the work that we plan for our summer, is to do that kind of deep dive.
And real quick, the reason I asked that is because we're looking at right now like our voting infrastructure and how Supreme Court rulings like may hinder. We look at gerrymandering or like redistricting, redlining, all that kind of stuff, and like all of that's changing. But at the same time, we have a governor in office who has seem to be wanting to re-implement some of the things that were removed, like, as it pertains to like African American history, and as it pertains, like to how we, like memorialize those things. So I'm just thinking, could this be an opportunity in time? And that's why I asked about sort of like how, how does that climb up the ladder, as it pertains to maybe there's currently more buy-in to be able to memorialize or have historical, objects within our public places.
I think, that's an interesting question. It really is, because especially as you think that we're really the blue spot in the very red state. And so I don't necessarily know that we have not, and again, we're almost 10 years in from this conversation. 2017 is its anniversary is next year. And so here, more than other places, those conversations are in some ways deeply embedded in how we move around in Charlottesville, I think. So I don't know if I can easily respond to the question. I know that we are proceeding as if we are able to proceed. And there has been nothing that says to this point that we are we're misstepping in that regard. All right. But I also want to say that at the same time, there is a sort of narrative that is being written about America that has very little to do with the ways in which the documents have said America has progressed. So when you live between those two spaces, especially this year, as it becomes very important in Virginia 250, to embrace a location's history and the way that history defines America, these are not spaces that are not fraught. And so you need to be very considered, I think, about how you create your processes. And so I think this process hopes to offer that deep consideration. And it is wants to offer everyone an opportunity to make some statement about what could or could not be put there.
Yeah, a few questions. I'll just toss them out and you can cover each one. First, I know you mentioned that the council will approve which project they would like to accept and have in their parks. I know that council recently approved a resolution for a public art commission. I know you're deep into your project now, but will you have to engage with that group at all?
Well, I'm actually on the steering committee of that group. So that's a good thing. But I think, that is kind of where we are in this project. It's sort of a synchronous moment. Because that art commission will have something to say about public art moving forward. And I believe that this goes back to a little bit of that earlier question even. As many people as you can engage as early on as you can engage them, that is the goal here. And the question was, what is the timing? Well, the timing is once we've chosen someone, then hopefully we begin this next phase of our conversation in the fall. And by that time, hopefully we've wrapped our arms around every constituency that we can, so that when we're going in at least with the tacit agreement that the conversation can be had.
Okay. I've always been curious, and for whatever reason haven't asked you this yet. Maybe I watched too many movies, but so the statue has been melted down. Is it just sitting somewhere as a lump of bronze? Is it in this bowl bubbling until the artist comes in and decides to mold and shape it? Well,
no, it's actually in an exhibition.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's in the Monuments exhibition, or was in the Monuments exhibition since it closed yesterday, but that exhibition opened in October.
Okay.
So the bronze, we've got 2 tons of bronze that are shaped as bricks, which we call ingots, which have been in this exhibition called Monuments that was installed at LA MoCA.
Okay.
And the brick, the MoCA and the brick put together this look at the issue of monuments since 2015. And so both the Stonewall Jackson, which is now a work that has been transformed by Carol Walker, and it's called Unmanned Drone.
Okay.
That was in the exhibition, and so our bronze is in the exhibition.
Okay.
And it will await a decision, and then based on what team, that's what will happen, where it will end up.
Yeah, okay. And then lastly, you've mentioned the proposed project from one of the groups that you've received a proposal from, but the other 2, have they proposed anything? Can you talk about those briefly?
And again, each one of these proposals really does engage the imagination. And I really appreciate the effort. And I also want to add that every single one of those design teams, whether in Charlottesville or to me personally, they really believe in the heart of this project. They really believe that this is a one-time opportunity. And so when you think about the number that we have, it's not a big number. $5 million is not a big number in this business. It's a baseline number. And so it's not because they're like, oh, this is a payday. It's because they understand the importance of what it means to transform symbol.
That's the nature of art, though, right?
Yeah. This is hard work more than anything.
Right.
So MASS, which is a nonprofit, which is really also very interesting. They're not a for-profit organization, so they are really deeply embedded in trying to change systems in ways that nonprofits do. They propose an object in Market Street Park. It is a series of trees that are sort of feminine in their rendering. Their engagement is to change the Market Street Park into what one would call a commons. And so they're the ones that are actually more deeply engaging with the park than the other 2. They are bringing in a baobab tree, which is a tree from Africa in particular, and they are also including a sonar component to it, which is the sort of sound of the baobab tree. And they are using African and Dinka symbols as organizational structure for the park. But they also, like Hood, are thinking about a dispersal. And so they're going to take the bronze and make seeds, and those seeds will then we hope, be placed in those other parks.
Okay.
And they are of a size that can be played on, sat on, utilized.
Okay.
So that's a really interesting one as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then Push Studio wants to engage Washington Park and Market Street Park. Their process is actually 2 years because 1 year of it is an artist residency.
Okay.
And in that 1 year in that artist residency, they're going to invite Charlottesville to help make the object itself. So this is a relationship between what they're calling towers and pillars. And the pillars are the things that will be dispersed, and the two towers will sit in the two parks. And they're using a process called rammed earth, where they're in community engagement, will invite people to bring earth with them from wherever they would like that, whatever that land means to them, bring that along. And that earth will then be the structure that then these things are
interesting.
created out of. So you can see that we've got three really mind, thought-provoking opportunities for us. And each one of those opportunities also presents this place of ownership. You can walk up to it and say, that looks like something that I brought. Or in Mass, there is an opportunity to take your handprint and actually have it placed inside the object. So you could very well be, Charles, your sons, Matt, your sons later on, you could be those are mommy's hands, those are daddy's hands, that's grandma. Right? So this is how these sort of amplifications of generational relationships occur in the objects. And so I think, the other important piece of this is that ultimately it's a co-creative process. What you see today does not necessarily mean that on the other end, that's what we build. So this is just a starting point. These are just the beginnings of the conversation. So, I have been enthralled by some of people that I've talked to about those opinions. And it's amazing to watch young people engage. They really do have opinions about these things. And so being able to record that and to bring them along in this project as well, right? A fifth grader, by the time hopefully we're engaging it, it's a seventh grader. Right. And they then will have a different relationship to that process as well.
So Dr. Douglas, as we kind of come to the end of the interview, I got to make sure that we cover for that person that's listening that is thinking, I like what they're saying. I have not been engaged. I have not lent my voice. All right. So they go to sipseville.com. And what is the ask?
The ask is at sipseville.com is to deeply engage with the proposals.
Okay.
Right. And if you don't want to go on the computer, come inside the Heritage Center. The exhibition allows you to see how we got here. So there are images by Eze Amos and Kristen Finn who tell the story from 2019 to 2023. I know people are curious about how we dismantled this thing and what happened. It's in that exhibition. Then engage with the story map. We wrote the social history of those parks. And I can tell you, it's surprising. You think about Belmont Park, and there is a moment in 1890 where they're having a black bike race that leaves from Belmont Park. Couple years later, that's also the site where the Ku Klux Klan is having their meetings. So these places are contested spaces, but we have delved deeply into that history, and you can access that. And then, being able to talk with people. So we have things that we call Sip Focus, where you can come in, and what I do is I look at one design at a time, and I talk about each individual design, including how much they cost, because cost is important, really important. So if anybody wants to, help, I won't say no.
Write that check, Mac.
and again, conversations with Selena, all of that stuff is available on our website. But I also think that this is a opportunity to commune with people. Don't just do it alone. Talk to somebody about it. Ask them their opinion. Maybe their opinion changes your opinion, or maybe you then both become solid in what you think should happen, and then ultimately let us know.
Right. Yeah.
Make a decision. We're asking.
I do too, Charles. To Dr. Douglas for keeping our history here in Charlottesville alive. I can't, so we get that comes across every time you sit down at the microphone here at the show, keeping our history alive, educating us. And it is very important for us to know where we come from, how we got to where we are. So thank you for that. And we had a conversation with President and Vice President elect of the UVA BSA earlier. And we talked about legacy, and one of them referenced leaving a legacy where Black people feel like the university belongs to them. And that's what comes across very clearly with every project you just described. For Black people, it feels like it's something that belongs to us. And again, those are the type of things that shape minds and change minds. So thank you so much for all of your hard work. And for those that are helping you with this.
I appreciate it. And yes, my colleagues, we've been at it for a long time, and they deserve just as much thanks as I do. So thank you for that as well.